Part 2. Alright, here we go. So last time I left you all off with the specials because I said that there was a lot to them. That was no lie. There's gonna be 9 attacks per special because of the types. So, yeah, that was really fun. I'm really gonna have to thank Bulbapedia for this, and they're not a sponsor, but I'd love to sponsor for them. But they gave me, well, they didn't give me. I looked up on Bulbapedia the types that Eevee could use, or well, rather her evolutions could use for each type. So thank you, Bulbapedia, if you're watching this. I'd love to sponsor you sometime. But anyway, I'd love to be a. And anyway, let's get back on track here. I'll be showing this mostly on that little picture thing that I do. I'll just be giving a few little explanations here and there for the specials. So... Alright, so this is how I'll be doing the explanations for most of the characters from now on, giving examples and things that are already in Smash. Now let's get into the actual moves. So for Eevee's neutral special, for water and grass, it would be kind of like Zelda's, a multi-hitting attack, although it cannot reflect. It does obviously more damage than 13%, but it isn't as strong a launcher as Zelda's. So this is really something good to rack up damage with. But for water and grass, it will have their specific effects. Water making the enemy slower, and grass, well, doing what grass does. Also, something I forgot to mention, these moves will have like counterparts in a way. One will be better for knockback and one will be better for damage. While both of these don't do nearly as much knockback as Zelda's and do more damage, they'll be a little balanced in a way. So for water, it'll do a little more, about halfway of knockback as Zelda does, and it would do less damage. For grass, it would do much more damage than either of them, but would basically just be for flinching, so you wouldn't be getting any KO potentials like I just did. Alright, so for the electric and dark type, it would be kind of like Donkey Kong's in a way, where it would do a little shockwave knocking opponents. Now, notice how I didn't say a shockwave on the ground. While for electric type, this would be the case. For dark type, it would be in the air. So if you're using the electric type, it would basically do what Donkey Kong's does. Just do a little hit, but not doing that much. It wouldn't be able to spike like Donkey Kong, so it just wouldn't be good overall. But for a dark type, you can use it on the ground, but it wouldn't be that good. I meant to do a jab, but it wouldn't be that good, only doing like flinching damage. But if you use it in the air, well, let's just say it would be much stronger. Speaking of which, like I did for the water and grass type, this would also have that little thing. So for the electric type, it would be stronger, but not doing that much knockback, unlike that bad example. But for the dark type, it wouldn't do that much damage, but it would do that much knockback, being able to get your foes off guard, like the general idea for a dark type. If they're in the air, they're not safe. Anyway. Alright, so for the fire and fairy type, it would be kind of like Cloud's charged down special, where there's a little combustion around him and that can hurt opponents. And I never realized how little damage that did before. Anyway, so for the fire type, it would be basically just be like this, doing a lot of damage, about that amount it should be. And it wouldn't be as good for knockback as it's more just to rack up damage. But for fairy, it would be very, very unique, and I have to go back to look at the paper. Okay, so I'll say the names of all the moves that's going to be at the end in a little end card like I did in part 1. But for this, it would have a little longer range, and it lowers enemies, it lowers the attack power of enemies, and it also makes all the foes a much lighter weight. It does very little damage and only flinches the opponents, but this is kind of good, while this kind of makes it so that Eevee can get the foe down to their level in terms of weight. Because remember, as I said, the fairy type is like it's insinuating peace. It has great mobility, but very weak. So this can make it so that Eevee can catch up to the foe while still being a great mobilized character. So this is a special you really want to use wisely with the fairy type, and one that you want to use to do about this much damage with the fire. And for the final neutral special, it'll be the Psychic and Ice type, the last two types remaining. And it'd be, well, I'll show the names at the end, but it'd kind of be like Snake's grenade attack, where it's a little hit at first and then a big. Let's get into the side special. Bam! Alright, so as for the Ice type and Psychic type, it'll be kind of like Snake's grenade attack, where it's a little, and I completely missed, where it's a little hit at first, and then it delivers a big blow. So for Ice type, it'll work a little differently. It'll have a little frost go downwards, kind of like the C4 attack, and then a little bit later explodes. It's not something you can do, it just does it automatically, which is why I used the grenade attack analogy. For Psychic type, it'll be just like this though, although instead of having a little explosion come, well, as an explosion or upwards like the Ice type will, it'll come straight down. It won't have any hitbox while it's coming down, just when it hits. Anyway, to the side special we go! Alright, so for the water and electric type, they'll be the same, but I couldn't really find a good example for this with any of the Smash fighters. This is pretty unique. So for the water and electric type, it'll be a projectile that when it hits a foe, for electric type, it'll do this, it'll paralyze, and for water type, it'll just go straight through the foe, doing um, more than this, but it'll do a lot of damage. As I said, it won't do any knockback, neither will the electric type. The electric type will not do any damage, it'll only paralyze, but it does paralyze for longer than normal, so it'll be good for good combos like this. So yeah, no knockback and no damage for the electric type, but it is a good combo starting move and a good one to rack up damage with for water. Anyway. Alright, so for the fire and dark type, it'll be fairly similar to Greninja as its projectile, and the more you hold it down, the bigger it'll get. For fire, it will also do multi-hitting damage like this, but for dark, it'll only do large knockback and very little damage. So it's kind of fitting into that theme, like even when you think you're safe, you really are not. But yeah, that's all for this. Pretty simplistic, and yeah. Alrighty, yes I am bad with getting items. Anyway, for the side special for the grass and fairy type, it'll be kind of like the, oh geez, it'll be kind of like this item called the healing field, where it'll have a little area come out, and for grass type, it'll just be like this. It's a field of healing. But for the psychic, fairy type, I mean, it'll be very different. It it neutralizes any status effects, quote unquote, which means any paralysis sort of thing, any sleep, poison, kind of things. For Joker, this would be the worst nightmare for his side special, but it would just kind of negate all of that. Kind of like how the move works in Pokemon. I'll go over what the moves are. But yeah, it just negates all that, which means you can't paralyze people in said area. You can't make people sleep, so Jigglypuff's worst nightmare, and you can't poison, etc. And it is also a much larger area than the healing field that you just saw. But anyway, back. I really need to go dig into Bulbapedia for this, so once again, thank you. And I will be able to thank Bulbapedia 10 times more for the up special. Because I could not think of one until I spent like maybe an hour looking for each of the types on Bulbapedia. So thank you for that. Let's do this. Bam!